Good afternoon, welcome to Rundlii Gaming. We're going to be doing another video. This one will be on Good afternoon, welcome to Rundlii Gaming. We're going to be doing another video. This one will be on Sheriff of Nottingham. This one is done by Arcane Wonders. It's a relatively new game, came out in the last couple of years now. And your goal is to get goods through the Sheriff of Nottingham. Basically, he's running the gate, and you're trying to bring goods into the city to your own personal market. And you're trying to collect as many apples, cheese, chickens, bread, but you can also collect a bit of contraband as well. The contraband, though is generally worth a lot more, can also get you in trouble if you're caught with the contraband. And the game is going to be whoever has the most victory points at the end of the game, which is going to be the equivalent of how much money you effectively made, because each of these goods are worth a different amount in your market. So at the end of the game, you're going to get a certain amount of victory points for that. So each player is going to get 50 coins worth. So each player has that. Then they're going to have one of these. They're pretty much a character sheet. They're a pretty good little reference guide as far as what people are going to make victory point wise at the end of the game, because they'll have some things on the side here, as well as it kind of goes over like the turn as well. And then also you'll have this little baggie, which is mostly used during the inspection phase to try to see which goods you're going to send through. Then also each player is going to be dealt 6 cards at the beginning of the round. So this is going to be your hand, and you can make adjustments to it during different phases as well. The game is played across 2 rounds, so each player is going to be Sheriff of Nottingham twice, unless you're playing in a 3-player game, which then each player is going to be Sheriff 3 times instead of 2. So on the initial phase, you're going to have the market phase. This is what's going to happen is each of the players, except for the sheriff, is going to be able to discard up to 5 cards in their hand. And let's say if this player here wants to get some illegal goods, they can discard up to 5 cards, and they can make a couple different choices here. Either they can draw 5 from the top of the deck. They can take up to 5 from the same discard pile, starting from the top going down. So let's say if I was wanting to build up on chickens, there's a chicken on top of this one, and there's also a bunch of illegal goods below it. So, but the cards you remove from your hand, you're going to put face down initially, and then you can either remove it from the top of the pile, or let's go ahead and just draw from the top. And each player, starting with the player that is left of the sheriff, is going to do that. So normally it would be this player first, this player second, this player third, and then at that point the market phase would end. At this point each player is going to load the merchant bag, which is the second phase of the game. This will not be for the sheriff either, because the sheriff is going to simply do the inspection phase. So we're going to go over some of this information on the card here. Now the green cards here are legal goods, which means as long as you announce that that is what you're bringing through, you will be fine. If the sheriff inspects your bag and it is exactly what you stated it is, he's going to pay a penalty on each of the legal goods you have. So sometimes it's not beneficial for him to inspect your goods if you are sending only legal stuff through. This is the coin at the top here is going to be how much it's worth at the end of the game. So if you got this through, it's going to be worth 3 victory points. Whereas you have this barrel of mead, which is worth 7 victory points, but if caught with it, you're going to have to pay 4. So let's say contraband were to come through the gate, the sheriff were to inspect your goods. Instead of him paying the fee for all the legal goods, you're going to pay the fee for all the contraband, or anything that was not declared. So that is how the cards themselves work. So at this point during the load merchant bag, each player is going to put a certain amount of goods within their bag. They can only put up to 5 cards in their bag, and they have to declare only one type of legal good. And that's going to make a little bit of a difference, because you could throw, say, 2 apples and a bread in the bag, but you can only declare one type of legal good. So let's say if I say, well, I have 3 apples. So let's say purple decided to throw 3 apples into the bag. If Sheriff were to inspect this particular one, he may open it up, and then he's going to see, well, you do have 2 apples, so you were truthful about the 2 apples at least. However, this is not an apple. The stuff that is not within the parameters of what you stated, you're going to get a penalty for. So in this case, the player that tried to send the 3 apples through is going to pay 2 because they lied about the bread. On top of that, they will also have to discard this particular bread because it wasn't part of the inventory they mentioned. They still do get their 2 apples though. So in the case of this particular round, the player is going to get more apples at least, but they will also lose some money because they tried to send the bread through and didn't actually declare that they're bringing bread through. So in that case, let's say they brought those through, those 2 are going to go to the player, that one goes to the discard pile. So that is how each of them are going to go. Let's go ahead and load each of these bags real quick. So blue in this particular one is going to declare that they are going to do 4 apples. And the 2 characteristics that you need to do during the declaration, which is the next phase, is what type of legal good it's going to be, as well as the number of cards in the bag. So in this case, we are going to declare 4 apples with that one. Normally the declaration and the load inspection bag are 2 different phases. A lot of times we combine it for simplicity purposes. Is once you load your bag, you usually hand it to the sheriff and say, this is how much is in my bag. And it's meant to be it's meant to promote a bit of role-playing and conversation, because you can kind of go, well, sir, in my bag I only have 4 apples. So it may be something that you can kind of role-play out a little bit and just have fun with. And let's say red here is going to load up 3 of these cheese. And we'll go ahead and put these over by the sheriff as well. So then he might declare the, sir, I only have 3 cheese in my bag. And at that point, maybe he wants to offer a small bribe, because you can also put a bribe on there to see whether or not maybe he'll just take the bribe and leave my bag alone. This last player is just going to send 2 cheese through. So at that point they would hand the sheriff all these different things here. And right now, at this point, they've already did their declaration. As I said, you can split the steps up. We usually just put the load merchant bag and the declaration in the same phase. That way, once you hand it to them, you can kind of explain what you have. At this point, there's going to be the inspection phase. This is primarily going to be the sheriff, whoever the sheriff is that round. It's mostly their phase. What he's going to do is he's going to start questioning the different players that are currently have their bags in front of them. Now he can try to pursue them to give a little bit higher of a bribe. He can make promises with them as far as exchanges they can make with it. Because let's say, for example, the blue player says, if you let my bag through, I will give you one of the apples out of the apples that I try to bring through. And as long as the agreement is going to be in the same turn, then that they have to honor that deal. Now, let's say if it's an agreement for something in the future, they do not necessarily have to honor that particular one. So that's something that they mention is like honor amongst thieves within the book, is that if the agreement itself is something that can happen within that same turn, then the sheriff as well as the player both have to honor that particular agreement. So blue could promise the sheriff, if you don't inspect my bag, I will give you one of the apples in my bag. So, and the same thing with red. He can offer a bribe. In this case, he already sent one coin through. Maybe he wants to push for a little bit higher to get something for himself out of this. He can request more money, different things. And then the same thing with purple. He might question purple a little bit further, just to kind of find out, is this person telling the truth or is this person lying to me? Now, once you hand the bag back to the color, so let's say he hands this purple bag back to purple, he can no longer change his mind. He has to stick with whatever he decided at this point. If at any point he unbuttons the bag, so let's say if he were to try to open up the bag, as soon as that is unsnapped, he's already in at that point as far as having to inspect the goods. So in this case, we know that blue here actually threw a meat in here, and they also threw 3 apples in here. So let's say if it was inspected, the players can get the 3 apples because they did declare the apples. However, they are not going to get the mead. Now, the mead itself is worth 7 money, but there's a penalty of 4. So because they inspected this bag, and the person that brought it through, which is blue, lied about it, they're going to have to pay the sheriff 4 gold. So in that case, because they lied about it, the sheriff would end up receiving 4 money out of this exchange. And then at that point, that goes to the discard pile, and then it continues on. Let's say, however, that they were allowed to pass. Let's say a sheriff says, well, I trust that the goods that you're bringing through are correct. And then at that point, he hands the bag back. Then at that point, that stuff's going to just kind of sit there until the end of round phase. We'll kind of explain that a little bit further. And at this point, the sheriff decides, I'm going to go ahead and just take this bribe because perhaps it's not worth actually looking into. So if he takes the bribe, he can no longer inspect the bag. So it's kind of a one or the other. If you agree to what the agreement is, in the case of, let's say, blue here, let's say he said, you can have one of my apples in the bag if you let me through the gate, then he would have had to give one of those apples to him on the phase as well. But let's say he were to accept the bribe of 1 coin, he would just take the 1 coin, he would then hand the bag back to red. At this point, let's say he's going to inspect purple. She didn't give any kind of money or bribe him at all. In that case, it's 2 cheese. Now, she did declare that there was 2 cheese, so in this case, it is considered a legal bag. She's going to receive her 2 cheese, and he's going to pay 2 money per cheese back to her. So he's going to pay her 4 money because basically he inspected goods that were completely illegal. And then at that point, you have the end of round phase. This is the part where everyone's going to draw back up to 6 cards. So let's say this person will draw 4 cards again. This person will draw 3 cards. And then this person will draw 2. And then at that point, the sheriff is actually going to pass to the left. And then the next player is going to continue that on. As I mentioned, this is going to continue on for 2 rounds. Everyone's going to be sheriff twice in a 4 or 5 player game. In a 3 player game, everyone's going to be sheriff 3 times. So that is how most of the game functions. The end of the game will end once everyone's been sheriff the 2 or 3 times, depending on player count. And on your card itself, you're going to see a couple other things here. You're going to have chickens on the side here, cheese on the side, apples, and bread. And you're going to see 2 different types of bonuses. You're going to have the gold and then the silver. On the gold is if you have the most of that type. So if I have the most apples at the end of the game, I'm going to get an additional 20 victory points, or 20 money for it. If I have second place, I'm going to get 10. How it works for a tie, let's say you're tied for first, you're going to add up the king and queen bonus, and then you're going to divide it by the 2. Let's say you're tied for second, so let's say one person got the most apples, but then 2 people are tied for the second most. You're going to split up that second bonus. In this case, the second bonus is 10. You're going to get 5 each for that. So that's how the bonuses work. And one thing I forgot to mention is that right after the inspection phase, we remember that blue had contraband in there. When they take their stuff out, they're going to put the apples face up within their market. They're not going to reveal their contraband. You just simply put it under your board. And you do have to declare that you did have contraband and how many cards of contraband, but you don't specify what type. So that is something to also remember, that after inspection phase, you are going to tell how many contraband that you had brought through, but you're not going to tell what type of contraband it was. So that's actually the game of Sheriff of Nottingham. It plays fairly quickly, it's fairly casual, and it's a very interactive game. So there's going to be a lot of socialization, a lot of bluffing and lying to each other. But it generally plays 3 to 5 players. Playing 6 players has come off a little bit weird usually, so it's not really recommended unless you were to get more cards, because the cards themselves kind of cycle out pretty quickly. But that's the game of Sheriff of Nottingham. If you've enjoyed the video, definitely like and subscribe if you haven't subscribed. We're going to be posting more videos next week, so thank you for watching Rundlii Gaming. You have a good day.